Chapter 1, Dogma. Crater Lake, Oregon, April 2nd, 2005. Remember, sometimes the most merciful ability man possesses is ignorance. Lightning flared and thunder boomed in the clear Oregon sky as Homicide Sergeant Doq Roberts approached the apex of the infamous island of Crater Lake. The body, wrapped in roots, was half buried into the rocky outcropping, impossible for it to be half submerged in any other way but divine. The grave was shallow, nothing more than a scab across the hard earth, but it was limestone nonetheless. Yet the roots of trees like clawed hands wrapped around a body as rigid as stone, digging deep into the rocky outcropping. It was there, on that coniferous island within Crater Lake, a silent tower of silence. The Crafter Slayer's killing streak ended, and it was all because of Doq and his lucid dreams. Far below the cliff he stood, hugging the coast of the island. A thick fog emerged, slithering its way up through the trees, up to the mountain. The way it boiled and bubbled as it lapped across the coastline subtly suggested intellect and intent, though it was stupid to believe it had hungered to take and consume all it touched. While the stars shone above, the fog smelling of autumn and ozone slowly thickening in the air threatened to choke Doq, pushing doubt in him that he could end the killer's streak and silence the mass murderer who killed under the constellation Perseus and who taunted the sergeant with tarot cards and letters written under his own wicked pseudonym, Mr. Skin. Staring out onto that mesmerizing view of the mirroring lake, a sense of deja vu hit Doq. This is what I painted. This is the composition called 402. 20 men and women from the FBI, LAPD, Oregon, and California State Patrol were called there to make the same discovery. While many knew who the Crafter Slayer was, either academically inclined or with a sick fascination, Doq alone had a direct attachment to that killer, for he had unwillingly known the Slayer on a subconscious level, having delved cyclically into his mind. It was the visions that Doq suffered through, visions of seeing the Slayer killing in his great crafting, that had opened the bottomless, unfathomable gulf of despair and depression. Before this night, the Crafter Slayer had taken the lives of over 100 men and women. Mr. Skin, the Slayer's alter ego, claimed he was trying to appease the gods, to stop them from taking him away from the atrocities he committed, something about viewing things no man should ever view. Doq charged up that hill, hoping to find the killer there at the top, the Slayer clutching tight to his bloody machete, a haunting smile that cut his face in two like the smile of some wicked Dullahan. Shivering at the sensation of the surveying eyes, Doq turned towards the ring of law enforcement circled around the body, holding back the pain of the tears in his eyes. He slowly approached his friend and confidant, Special Agent Ray, who headed the efforts, and the 10 men and women who ringed the body. Doq turned his eyes down towards her, that grotesque statue half sank into the limestone, one hand stretched out, pleading for him to grab it, to bring her out of that limestone prison, to save her. Agent Ray had called out to the commander of the operation, LAPD Lieutenant Dahlstrom, and urged all men down the hill of that silent island. But Doq was grounded for a moment on that spot of earth which began to claim the woman. As if a heavy force laid itself upon him, Doq sank to his knees, driven to the woman embedded into the limestone. Agent Ray approached him cautiously, unaware of the tears forming in his eyes and the sudden urge to scream out. The face half buried in the limestone registered pain in Doq, and tears welled into his raw, sleep-deprived eyes. A wave of cold and electricity hit him as Doq entwined his hands around hers. Just on the edge of sensation, it hit him like a hammer to his temples, and a burning warmth filled his stomach. This sensation wasn't wholly unwarranted, nor was the terror that built up in him. Just as the light of the full moon broke through the veil of a single lone cloud, it had become visible, a sign of grave danger. Wild signs flooded through his thoughts. That body was a trap. The island was verboten. Leave now! Flee! Fuga! Sickness swept through Doq with a great certainty that death was reaching his sweeping, wispy hands of blackness to them all. She had it on her, that damn dreaded symbol, the third eye, tainted chakra. It took Doq a good moment to settle his raw eyes, to gather his focus, and register that the FBI agent was standing behind him. "You know who this was, Doq, don't you?" Ray asked. "You saw her in your dreams. You saw him kill her." Letting go of her hand, Doq breathed deep, too sober to speak, as the aromas of autumn, so atypical for that spring night, swept over him with great nostalgia. It was almost like a beacon on that solemn night, a temptation to push forward, to move to a certain end, towards his own death. It was in that moment when great despair filled him, Doq found what he was looking for. In the unbroken Prussian blue light, the faint silhouette of a man stood down on the beach, looking out to the mirrored lake. Doq jumped up and ran, not caring about the dangerous rocky landscape or the powerful man that held the fog at bay. Everything was a blur after that, charging down the hill, rushing past the phalanx of a man controlled by a single constellation. All that drove Doq was finding the bastard who killed her. He mentally clutched onto Doq like a vice grip, choking what hope resided in him. He was taunting Doq to chase him, to take him down. The bouquet of ozone on him grew so palatable that it burned his tongue. So consumed by hate, Doq ignored the danger of the boiling fog and the threat of utter death if he dared touch it. Upon approaching a clearing, Doq spotted a figure at the shoreline of the Caldera beach, bent over and panting loudly. Strangely, it was the only part of the coastline of Wizard Island that had been free of the lively fog, almost as if it avoided the man. The acrid stench of ozone grew stronger, licking the back of his throat with a burning cough, but Doq ignored the danger, ignored the man's power. He charged the figure full speed, kicking him square in the back, dropping him to the ground. Something he'd been clutching, a knife, a sword, machete, flew out of his hands and hit the ground hard. Taking no chances, Doq placed the barrel of his gun against his head and demanded the man remain still. But what the madman said next chilled him to the bone. "It's a lovely night, isn't it, detective?" asked the man, untroubled. "It'd be so nice to cuddle up with the spouse, wouldn't it?" Doq threatened to arrest him, but the slayer suggested that his threats meant nothing to him. Such a plain-looking man he was, too. He was wearing a loose-fitting white University of California LA t-shirt stained with blood and drenched in sweat. Despite his confident manner, the man shivered. His head was topped with a tight crop of dark hair, but his face was hidden behind a white mask. It was that of a laughing jester, its face full of gnarly wrinkles. Overall, the man seemed unopposing, so torpid that Doq was shocked by the man's next words. "You're actually just the man I was looking for, so striking and smooth, so impressive and..." His words rang dangerously in Doc's ears, rattling his skull with tinnitus, filling his stomach with fire. Doq rammed his pistol against the man's right temple, taking no chances. But the man just laughed, cold and maniacal. "It doesn't matter if you take me into custody," stated the man, his sweat glistening in the dying sunlight like golden flecks. "You'll never truly have me, Rev Dragon." In the blue light of the moon, the Slayer's eyes began to glisten behind his mask, and the air about him distorted like rippling heat. "Tell me why you murdered her, you bastard," Doq demanded. But the man just laughed again, sending shivers up Doc's back and his armed hand lowering. Then, with a sweeping gesture, disregarding the gun digging into his skull, the Slayer lifted his hand into the sky, his index finger lining up with a hideous constellation. Perseus. And for a split second, a burst of blue light, like a rippling halo, bright enough to see with the naked eye, burst up from the star called Algol. A trick of the eye, Doq flinched, his eyes watered. The Slayer's mechanical laugh grew louder. I had to save her! I had to save them all! You gotta understand! I had to save them from it! Footfalls approached from behind Doq, and the phalanx of men were catching up. Doq seriously considered blowing the man's head clear from his shoulders, but doing so would have only added things so much more horribly. You're gonna rot in hell for what you've done! Doq roared, caring not to keep his voice down. The man held his breath and maniacally laughed for a third time. There are far worse places than hell, my friend. You know that as well as I, that there are places where no soul would ever want to go. You've seen them, haven't you, Red Dragon? I can tell. Like me, you've died and come back to life, directed by the lights of him, Mr. Skin. You've taken the bullet and come back to life. You witness this world, his Kadith, hath a claw, and know that there's no way to stop it. Driven by Perseus above me as you were, dreaming of that forest, you can connect with it, can't you? Just like Dr. Lovecraft, you can drift into that unknown Kadith, and from it you can see all! A terrible sensation ripped through Doc's body just then, like some foreign entity, some alien bug invaded his body and slipped into his skin, brushed up against his spine, and began tickling him. Sweat dripped down Doc's face as he labored for breath. His lungs burned from the run. Strangely, the thick fog, a thick wall of bubbling oil glistening in the moonlight, crowned the caldera, but did not approach the both of them. And just then, Doq grew aware of the fog and began fearing it as it slowly approached the two of them. It was only when Doq was slapping the handcuffs around the man and dragged him back to his feet when his nose caught a whiff of it. The pungent aroma of apples and cinnamon, anise and nutmeg. The sense of autumn, and a gateway into his dreams. Doc's guts twisted in an effort to stay from getting sick, but the fog enveloped the two of them, bringing to life the violent nightmares behind the mask.